how a call from my ex-mother-in-law, 3 months after my divorce, shook my life to its core and put everything that belonged to an atrocious past back in its place. If you find this story interesting, please support is a great driving force for us. On a peaceful Sunday afternoon, the ringing of my phone broke the silence. I was sitting on my balcony with a hot cup of chamomile tea with honey in my hands, absorbed in the pages of a half-read book. It was a sense of peace so rare that I hadn't dared to dream of it in the last 5 years. My cell phone screen lit up, displaying an unknown but chillingly familiar number. I frowned, hesitated for a moment, and swiped to answer. Hello? On the other end of the line, a sharp, nervous woman's voice hit my eardrums, mixed with the sound of ambulance sirens and people shouting. Sophia, come to Northwestern Memorial Hospital right now. Mark has been in a horrible car accident. It's very serious. The doctor says they have to operate on him immediately, but his insurance lapsed, and we need $35,000 for the specialist deposit. Bring the money quickly and save your husband. If you don't hurry, it'll be too late. I froze for a second. That voice, that arrogant and imperious voice. I would recognize it even if I were turned to ashes. It was my ex-mother-in-law, Eleanor. But wait, your husband? What was she talking about? I set the teacup on the table, a soft clink echoing in the air. I took a deep breath, hoping the soothing aroma of chamomile would calm my racing heart, startled by the surprise. And then I let out a laugh, a light chuckle tinged with mockery, but loaded with a sky-high contempt. Excuse me, I think you have the wrong number, I replied with a voice so serene it was icy. Or maybe age is affecting your memory. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then an even louder scream erupted, as if she wanted to shatter my phone's speaker. What are you talking about? I am your mother-in-law, Mark's mother. Your husband is bleeding to death in the ER. You are his wife, so get the money and save him. $35,000. The figure that came out of her mouth sounded as light as a feather. Did she think I was a money-printing machine? Or did she still think I was the same naive, oppressed Sophia from 3 months ago? I stood up and walked over to the railing, watching the people going about their business down below. The evening breeze ruffled my hair. I smelled the scent of freedom, a freedom won with blood and tears. Eleanor, I said, calling her by her first name, no longer using the old title of mother-in-law. I think you should take some memory vitamins. It's been 3 months since the judge finalized the divorce decree. Your son Mark and I are nothing anymore. Why should I care if he dies, lives, gets in an accident, or gets sick enough for you to ask me for $35,000? By what right? And who are you to ask me? On the other end of the line, her heavy breathing was clearly audible. She must have been in shock, perhaps surprised that her once submissive daughter-in-law dared to talk back, or shocked by my coldness, or maybe because she realized her illusory authority had popped like a soap bubble. You! How dare you speak to me like that? Despite everything, you shared a bed for years. There is affection between you. He is my son. Can you really watch him die without flinching? You ruthless woman, I'm going to tell everyone your true colors. She started with her usual string of threats and emotional blackmail. I smiled. It was a smile tinged with a bit of the bitterness of the past. Affection? You dare mention that word to me? Did you think about affection that stormy night when you and your son threw me out of the house? Did you think about affection when your son beat me until my face was covered in bruises just to defend that young mistress of his? Did you think about affection when, during the divorce trial, you encouraged him to hide all his assets so that I would leave empty-handed with a little girl? I paused, swallowing the bitter lump forming in my throat. It felt like the wounds in my heart, which I thought had healed, were bleeding again under her claws. But it didn't hurt anymore. I just found it ridiculous. Eleanor, I heard your son is about to get married again, isn't he? To that Chloe girl. So beautiful and capable, they say she comes from a good family and is carrying that baby boy you crave so much. Why don't you call her? She has plenty of money. Ask her to bring the cash to save her future husband. Don't make a fool of yourself calling the ex-wife. The other end of the phone fell dead silent. Only her ragged breathing and the chaotic noise of the hospital could be heard. I must have hit the nail on the head. Surely something had happened to that magnificent future daughter-in-law for Eleanor to swallow her pride and call me the person she considered trash. Chloe, that girl. Eleanor's voice suddenly broke, losing all its strength and arrogance. That girl disappeared with all the money. I'm begging you. Please. Just this once, save Mark. I beg you. I'm sorry, but I'm neither a saint nor a charity bank. That $35,000 is to raise my daughter. Yes, the very granddaughter you once called a useless girl. I'm hanging up. I firmly pressed the end call button. The screen went black, and the endless beep seemed to cut the final tie binding me to that hellish family. I slumped into my chair. My hands were still trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the anger I had suppressed for so long that was now surfacing. Only 3 months since I walked out the door of that townhouse. They must have thought I would be dying in some miserable rented room, that I would come crawling back on my knees to beg for their affection. But life is unpredictable. The Sophia of today was no longer the Sophia of yesterday. And Mark, the man who betrayed me for another woman, was now lying there waiting for death, abandoned by that very mistress. Karma. It sounds like an ethereal word, but is there any other that manifests itself more clearly and cruelly in reality right now? I took a sip of my chamomile tea. The sweetness of the honey and the slight bitterness of the brew mixed on my tongue. I remembered the day, 5 years ago, when I first stepped into Eleanor's house as her daughter-in-law. Back then, I also naively believed in the word family. I dedicated all my heart, my money, and my youth to that home. And what did I get in return? A vile betrayal and a cruel calculation that chilled me to the bone. Would you believe it? I, who earned $5,000 a month as a marketing manager, had to hand over my entire bank account to my mother-in-law, and every morning I received barely $15 to buy groceries. A wife who gave everything for her husband didn't realize he was secretly cheating on her for 2 years right under her nose. And the ultimate shamelessness. They tried to sell me out to get money to support the mistress. The story of my life, my tear-filled marriage, and my dazzling transformation to take revenge in the most civilized way, has only just begun. What Eleanor just said on the phone is only the tip of a giant iceberg. Why did Mark end up in this situation? What is the true identity of the mistress, Chloe? And what did I do to open their eyes? The cup on the table had already cooled, but the bitter aftertaste of the call still lingered on my tongue, permeating every corner of my memory. I closed my eyes and surrendered to the evening breeze. Time rolled back 5 years, to the day when I, at 25 years old, full of faith and love and vitality, happily entered Eleanor's home dressed in an immaculate wedding gown. That day, everyone said I had made a great match. My then husband, Mark, had an intellectual and gentle look, and was the only child of a family with a beautiful 4-story brownstone in a nice Chicago neighborhood. I, although from a smaller Midwestern town, had graduated with top grades from a prestigious university, and worked as a marketing team lead with a salary everyone envied. But in the eyes of my in-laws, I was nothing more than an upstart. But as the saying goes, you don't know there are bedbugs until you get into bed. That seemingly perfect house was actually a suffocating prison that trapped my youth and freedom. On the very night of our wedding, without even having unpacked the gifts, Eleanor called me into the living room. Sitting in a carved hardwood chair, she handed me a piece of paper full of family rules with an impassive face. Sophia, it is a great blessing that you have joined our family as a daughter-in-law. I'll tell you in advance how you should behave. We are a small family, and Mark's father passed away early, so I raised my son alone. That's why I can't bear to see my son lose out. Starting this month, I will manage your salaries, yours and Mark's. I was stunned and stammered. What? But, Eleanor, we are adults. We want to manage our own money, handle our expenses, and save. Save for what? Eleanor cut me off with a sharp voice. You young people, as soon as you have money, you spend it like crazy. I am managing it for your own good. When you have a major need, I'll give it to you. Or are you worried I'll keep it? Mark agrees. A wife should obey her husband. I looked at my husband, expecting him to defend me, but Mark kept his head down, peeling an apple. Just leave it to my mom, honey. She'll do a better job than you. Don't be so calculating with my mother. His words were like a bucket of cold water. But since I was a newlywed and wanted to live in peace, I swallowed my tears and handed over my bank account access. And that was the beginning of my transformation into a high-class, unpaid maid. Every morning before going to work, I had to get up at dawn to clean the spacious 4-story townhouse and go to the local market to prepare breakfast. Eleanor was extremely demanding. The beef stew broth had to be made with bones simmered from the night before, and the vegetables had to be washed leaf by leaf. Then I would rush to my corporate office, where I worked frantically under the pressure of being a team lead. In the afternoon, when my coworkers suggested going to a spa or a coffee shop, I had to rush home to make it in time for dinner. Mark, upon returning from work, would sit on the couch with his legs crossed, watching TV, waiting for the table to be set. Eleanor would return from her exercise class and complain about a speck of dust on the stairs, or if the soup was too bland or too salty. The most humiliating part was the money. My salary was $5,000. Mark's was $2,500, and it was all sitting in Eleanor's safe. Every morning she gave me exactly $15. $5 for my lunch and transit, and the remaining $10 to buy dinner for 3 people. Manage it well and don't waste it on nonsense, she would warn me, eyeing the bills as if she feared I would rob her. $10 for a dinner for 3 in an expensive city like Chicago. I had to rack my brain, go to the discount grocery stores early, and haggle for cheap cuts of meat or vegetables. Some days, to buy a whole chicken for a good broth for my husband, I skipped lunch and filled my stomach with water from the office cooler to compensate for the expense. Once, for the company Christmas party, I needed a dress. I opened my closet and only found old clothes from college. I gathered my courage and asked Eleanor for $150 for a new dress. She looked at me as if I were asking her to rob a bank. A dress to seduce who? You're already married, wear whatever. $150 is a month's worth of groceries for some people. Don't be so wasteful. I felt so humiliated that I ran to my room crying and complained to Mark. He, who was playing a video game, frowned in annoyance when he heard me. Don't make such a fuss over a dress. My mom is right. Stop being so superficial. You look fine to me even in pajamas. At that moment, I realized that my husband was not only spineless but also cruelly insensitive. He was used to his mother's protection and took my servitude for granted. In his eyes and his mother's, I was nothing more than a money-making machine and a domestic robot with no desires or feelings. I thought about getting a divorce then, but 2 clear lines appeared on the pregnancy test. The baby, who arrived at my most desperate moment, became the rope that tied me to that hell. I consoled myself. Come on, hold on a little longer for the baby. When the grandchild is born, Eleanor will change and Mark will mature. But I was wrong. My silent sacrifice, far from being respected, was mercilessly trampled with the appearance of a third person. She walked in and shattered the facade of fake family happiness. When my daughter Lily turned 2, there was a small change in Mark's work life. He was promoted to department manager. His salary didn't go up much, but dinners with clients and meetings with partners became frequent. I started to notice a strange change in my husband. Mark cared more about his appearance. He put on cologne every time he went out, and above all, he was inseparable from his cell phone. He changed the passcode, always left it face down, and often went out to the balcony in the middle of the night to whisper on calls. My woman's intuition alerted me to a bad omen, but every time I asked him, Mark denied everything. Stop being so paranoid. I have enough stress at work without you interrogating me like a cop at home. Where am I supposed to relax? Eleanor, seeing our arguments, always took her son's side. He works himself to death outside to support you and your daughter, and you get jealous like a little girl. A jealous woman is the dumbest kind. Once again, I swallowed my anger and kept quiet, until one day, while Mark was taking a shower, I accidentally saw a message pop up on his lock screen. Baby, come over tonight. I miss you. Our little boy misses his daddy too. The sender was Chloe, his secretary. I felt my world come crashing down. Our little boy. It meant Mark had another child. With trembling hands, I secretly unlocked his phone. Luckily, I had seen him type the passcode the night before. What I saw were countless sappy messages and intimate photos of Mark with a young, beautiful, and sexy woman. She was the new secretary from a partner firm, and her name was Chloe. But what plunged me into despair weren't the whispers of love, but the bank transfer receipts. Honey, send me $100 for my prenatal vitamins. We have to take good care of our heir. Babe, what a beautiful Chanel bag. It's only $3,000. You'll buy it for me, right? I'll ask my mom for some money and send it to you. My legs went weak. The salary that I earned with the sweat of my brow and gave to my mother-in-law wasn't being saved, like she said. She gave it to Mark, and Mark used it to support his mistress. An even more terrible fact was revealed when checking older messages, a conversation between Mark and his mother. Mom, Chloe had an ultrasound. The doctor says it's a boy, 90% sure. Your grandson. Really? Oh, what a blessing. Well done, son. Take good care of her. You don't know how sick I was of Sophia only giving me a girl. For now, don't say anything to Sophia. When Chloe gives birth, we'll see. If you need money, tell me. With Sophia's salary, we can support my grandson. I dropped the phone on the bed. The thud sounded like my heart shattering into pieces. This family was an organized ring of scammers. The woman I had called mother-in-law and cooked for over the last 5 years was an accomplice to her son's adultery. Far from stopping it, she was using my hard-earned money to raise the fetus in her son's mistress's womb, all because of that antiquated, cruel, patriarchal mentality. For my daughter Lily, her blood granddaughter, she had never bought so much as a carton of milk or a piece of candy. She despised her, calling her the useless girl. But for the unborn son of a stranger, she was willing to support him even at the cost of scamming her daughter-in-law. Hatred, rage, pain, all the negative feelings boiled in my chest until I was out of breath. I wanted to run to the living room and rip the disgusting masks off that pair, but my rationality as a businesswoman stopped me. If I made a scene now, what would I achieve? Mark would deny it, or worst case, he would leave with his mistress. Eleanor would join him in throwing me and my daughter out on the street. The properties were in her name, or Mark's, and I didn't have a dime. I would lose everything and begin a life of hardship. Calm down. You have to make a plan. You have to get this rotten family out of your life. And take back what is yours. I wiped away my tears, put the phone back in its place, and tried to steady my breathing. Mark came out of the bathroom whistling. I kept folding my daughter's clothes with a face as serene as a lake before a storm. Are you done showering? Are you eating at home tonight? I asked sweetly, as if I knew nothing. No, today I have to see a client with the boss. I'll be late. You girls go ahead and eat, Mark said as he combed his hair and sprayed on cologne. I now knew that cologne was for another woman. Okay, be careful. As I watched Mark's back disappear behind the door, my gentle smile vanished. In its place appeared a sharp gaze. Enjoy everything while you can. These will be your last happy days. Now that I know the truth, the price you'll pay will be higher than you can imagine. In the following days, I started secretly investigating Chloe. Who was she? Why had she set her sights on an indecisive man with a modest salary and full of pretensions like Mark? And most importantly, I discovered that Mark and Eleanor were hatching a terrible conspiracy to snatch the only property I owned, a plot of land my parents gave me as an inheritance gift. What did they intend to do with that land? And how did I manage to turn the tables and use their own trick against them? Would the truth about the baby boy and the mistress Chloe be as simple as they thought? From that fateful night when I discovered the secret on my husband's phone, I lived like a ghost in that house. On the outside, I was still the obedient daughter-in-law. I went to work, prepared the food, but inside, my heart had grown cold and was full of suspicion. I knew that fake peace was just the calm before a massive storm. And that storm came sooner than I thought, not from the mistress, but from the endless greed of the mother and son. One weekend evening, Eleanor uncharacteristically went into the kitchen herself to prepare my favorite dish, a hearty beef stew. She served me a bowl kindly, and her smile was so sweet it gave me chills. Mark, sitting next to me, was also strangely affectionate, constantly asking if my work was too stressful. After dinner, Eleanor called us into the living room. She poured a cup of tea, cleared her throat, and started talking. Sophia, lately Mark has been doing well at work, and a great opportunity has come up to invest with some friends and open a restaurant franchise, but he's a little short on capital. So I was wondering if you could help your husband. I took a sip of tea, hiding a smirk. How could I help him? If you manage my entire salary, where am I going to get the money? Eleanor hesitated for a moment and then cut straight to the chase. Your parents gave you a plot of land by the highway upstate as a gift, right? I heard its value has gone up a lot. Go home and convince your parents to sell it. With that money, we can fund Mark's business. If your husband does well, it'll ultimately be good for you, right, Mark? Beside her, He supported her with shining eyes. Yes, honey. It's a unique opportunity. Sell it. I promise I'll pay you back in 2 years. When I make money, I'll buy you a piece of land twice as big. I looked at the mother and son with absolute contempt. That land was my last refuge, the property my parents had bought with their life savings for their retirement, and they dared to ask me to sell it. Actually, thanks to snooping on Mark's phone and eavesdropping on Eleanor's calls, I already knew what business opportunity they were talking about. There was no restaurant franchise. The truth was that Mark had gotten into massive debt from gambling and sports betting. The debt amounted to tens of thousands of dollars, and the loan sharks had threatened to break his legs if he didn't pay. On top of that, his mistress Chloe was threatening to abort his precious son if he didn't buy her a luxury condo to spend her pregnancy in peace. Mark and Eleanor were caught between a rock and a hard place. They couldn't sell the townhouse they lived in without losing face in front of the neighbors. So they had set their sights on my only property. They intended to pluck me to the last penny to support the mistress and pay off the gambling debts. That land is in my parents' name. I don't have the right to sell it, I replied coldly, putting down the teacup with a decisive gesture. Eleanor's face hardened and her smile vanished. Well, you go and sweet-talk your parents. You're their only daughter. Who else are they going to give it to if not you? Does it hurt you to give it to your husband? His business is at stake. Business or a mountain of debts? I asked casually, staring right at Mark. Mark startled and knocked over his glass of water. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm a serious businessman. What debts? All right, I said, faking a sigh and standing up. I'll think about it. It's an important decision. I can't decide right now. I went to my room, leaving mother and son sitting there with disgruntled faces. That night, I heard an argument coming from Eleanor's room. Mom, look how stubborn she is. If she doesn't sell the land, I'm dead. The loan sharks told me to pay next week, and Chloe is threatening to leave. Relax, I'll handle her. If she doesn't do it the easy way, we'll have to do it the hard way. She lives in our house, and we have her daughter. Where is she going to go? If we pressure her, she'll eventually cave. Hearing those cruel words, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. They didn't see me as family, but as prey. I had to act before they did. The next day, I secretly took the day off. I gathered all my important documents and the deed to the land that I had hidden and deposited them in a safe deposit box at the bank. And to have proof, I installed a small hidden camera in the living room. But I never imagined their cruelty would go beyond asking me for money. It was their greed and lust that brought the tragedy to its breaking point and caused that fateful, stormy night I will never forget. On a Friday afternoon, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Mark holding a woman by the waist, walking into a luxury hotel downtown, followed by a provocative message. Hey sis, your husband takes very good care of me and our baby. You just stay home and cook, okay? The sender was none other than Chloe. She was provoking me. She wanted me to lose my temper and leave on my own, clearing the way for her to enter Eleanor's house. My blood boiled. I couldn't take it anymore. I left my daughter with my mother and took an Uber to the address in the photo. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to end this farce with a three-way confrontation in front of the door to room 302. My heart was pounding. I took a deep breath and knocked. Who is it? Mark's voice called out, slurred with alcohol. Room service. The door opened. Mark, wearing only a towel around his waist, had a flushed face. Inside, Chloe, in a sheer nightgown, was lying on the bed, stroking her slightly bulging belly with a triumphant expression. Seeing me, Mark went pale and froze. Sophia, what are you doing here? I didn't answer. I stepped into the room and stared hard at Chloe. She didn't look scared at all. On the contrary, she cracked a smile and sat up slowly. Hi, Sophia. Perfect timing. Mark just promised me he's going to buy a house for me and our baby. Mark, I said, turning to my husband, my voice trembling with contained rage. Where are you going to get the money to buy a house for this woman? From the money from selling my parents' land? Or from the money you've been stealing from my paycheck all these years? Mark looked back and forth between Chloe and me, not knowing what to do. Chloe pursed her lips. Don't be so hard on him. He's the precious heir of the family. What's wrong with spending a little money? I'm giving him what you couldn't, a baby boy. You should be thanking me. Thanking you? I laughed bitterly. Thanking you? A home-wrecking gold digger? Do you think he loves you? He's just using the kid in your belly to get money out of his mother. And you only care about his money. You two are made for each other. Disgusting. Shut up, Mark suddenly yelled, lunging at me. How dare you insult Chloe? She's carrying my son. Your son? Are you sure it's your son? I spat the doubt I had been harboring for a while. That sentence was the fuse to the bomb. Chloe started screaming and putting on a dramatic show. Baby! She's cursing our baby! Does she want to kill our child? Hit her! Mark, blinded by alcohol and the urge to protect his mistress, raised his hand without hesitation. A sharp smack rang out, followed by a burning sting on my cheek. I stumbled and fell, hitting my head against the corner of a table. Blood started to trickle down my forehead. I looked up at the man I once called my husband. He stood there with clenched fists and bloodshot eyes, without a trace of remorse. Get out of here. Get out of my sight, you witch, Mark roared. I staggered to my feet and wiped the blood from my forehead. I looked at Chloe, who was smiling triumphantly, and at Mark, looking as ferocious as a beast. It didn't matter anymore. My tears had dried up. Fine. I'm leaving. I leave this garbage to you. I hope you're happy in your pigsty. I ran out of the hotel and took a cab straight home. I had to talk to Eleanor. I harbored a tiny sliver of hope that, although greedy, she was still a mother and a grandmother. I thought if she knew her son had beaten his wife over a mistress, she would have some shred of conscience left. But I was completely wrong. When I got home, it started pouring rain. I walked into the living room, soaked and with blood on my forehead. Eleanor was watching TV and looked surprised to see me. What happened to you? Are you crazy? What kind of look is that? Are you trying to embarrass the family? Eleanor, I said, my voice cracking. Mark is cheating on me. He hit me. He's been supporting that woman with the family's money. I expected her to be shocked and ask what happened, but no. Eleanor took a sip of tea without taking her eyes off the TV and said coldly, I know. I froze. She knew. She knew and did nothing. She encouraged her son to be unfaithful. Eleanor turned to me with a look of contempt I will never forget. What's wrong with a man having a little fun outside the home? The important thing is that Chloe is going to give us a boy. She's smart and charming. What have you done for this house all these years? Just gave birth to a girl, penny-pinched all the money, and refused to sell a piece of land to help your husband. You are a useless daughter-in-law. Eleanor? Don't call me that. It gives me the chills. She stood up and pointed to the door. Mark called me. He says you behaved like an uneducated brat and insulted his girlfriend. We don't need a daughter-in-law like you in this house. If you have any decency, get out of my sight right now. That way I can bring Chloe in. I'm not going to let my precious grandson be raised on the streets. You're kicking me out? In the middle of the night? I asked, trembling. Get out now, or are you going to make a scene? With that, she ran to my room, forcefully shoved some of my clothes into an old suitcase, and threw it out onto the patio. Out, and don't even think about taking anything else from this house. You say Lily is with your parents? Then let her stay there. We're not raising a useless girl in this house. I stood in the middle of the patio under the cold, pouring rain. The blood on my forehead mixed with the water. My suitcase lay in a puddle. The heavy door slammed shut in front of me, severing all affection and hope. I looked up at the imposing 4-story brownstone, the place where I had invested 5 years of my youth, scrubbing every brick, cooking every meal. Now, it had become a cold fortress rejecting me. That stormy night, dragging the heavy suitcase, I stumbled out of the familiar alley. I didn't look back. I knew I had just escaped hell. Hurt and humiliated, yes. But I had survived, and I swore to the heavens that those who had thrown my daughter and me out onto the street that night would pay for it. I caught a cab, went back to my parents' house, hugged my daughter, and cried inconsolably. After that stormy night, I returned to my parents' house with a broken body and a wounded heart. My parents, seeing their daughter emaciated and their granddaughter confused, were devastated. My father, a peaceful man his whole life, slammed the table and shouted, "Divorce him right now. Is there no food for you and your daughter in this house? Don't have any consideration for those ungrateful people." Thanks to my parents' support, I filed for divorce the very next morning. I thought everything would end quickly, and we would each go our separate ways. But I underestimated the cruelty of Eleanor and her son. For them, divorce wasn't the end of a relationship, but the final opportunity to fleece me of every last penny before banishing me from their lives forever. The first mediation hearing took place in a suffocatingly tense atmosphere. Eleanor and Mark showed up at the courthouse accompanied by a lawyer and even some strangers, who I later found out were fake witnesses. Mark, sitting across from me, had lost all the ferocity of that rainy night and wore a cold, calculating face. He didn't look at me once, focused entirely on his papers. When the judge asked about the division of assets and custody, Mark's lawyer stood up and presented an argument that left me stunned. Your Honor, my client requests full custody of Lily. Miss Sophia lacks the moral qualifications to be a mother. She has committed adultery, neglected her home, and currently has no stable income or permanent residence, living off her parents. I jumped up and yelled, "That's a lie! He's the adulterer. He has another woman and even a child with her." Eleanor immediately chimed in, pointing her finger at me. "Don't yell! Don't talk nonsense! My son is a decent man. Who knows what kind of guy you've been sleeping with while claiming you were working day and night? I have proof right here." She threw a stack of blurry photos onto the table, showing me eating and drinking coffee with a male colleague from my company. The photos, taken secretly, were cleverly angled to look intimate. They had even hired a stranger to pose as my lover and testify that we had been seeing each other secretly for 2 years. My blood boiled. Not only did they want to take my daughter away, but they also wanted to completely destroy my reputation. They wanted to turn me into an unfaithful woman to justify kicking me out and keeping my assets. As for the finances, Mark claimed that all the family savings came from his job, and that my salary was barely enough for my personal expenses. He demanded half of my inherited land, claiming its value had increased thanks to the husband's efforts. He shamelessly denied that Eleanor had managed my entire salary for the last 5 years. I looked at Mark and Eleanor with nausea rising in my throat. How could anyone be so vile? Not content with devouring my flesh, they now wanted to drink every last drop of my blood. But they had forgotten one thing. I am a businesswoman. I could endure a lot for my family, but when backed into a corner, I know how to fight back. I took a deep breath and signaled my lawyer. Calmly, he opened his briefcase and presented the crucial evidence I had secretly gathered. First, regarding the adultery accusation, we presented the security camera footage from my company, proving those meetings were work-related and always in the presence of other colleagues. We also presented the audio recording of the argument from that night, where Mark admitted to having a child with Chloe, and Eleanor's voice could be heard kicking me out of the house. The fake witness, after a few sharp questions from my lawyer, stammered, got nervous, and finally confessed he had been paid $200 to put on the act. Second, regarding the assets, we presented bank statements from the last 5 years. Although Eleanor demanded my money in cash, my company deposited my salary into my account. I proved that my regular withdrawals perfectly matched the dates she made deposits into her savings account, which I had also managed to secretly photograph the passbook for. Most importantly, the deed to the land explicitly stated exclusive gift to Sophia Martin, and was notarized before the marriage. Legally, it was separate property. Mark had no right to a single inch of that land. The court, after examining the evidence, dismissed all of Mark's ridiculous claims. I was granted full custody of Lily, and Mark was ordered to pay monthly child support. The land was recognized as my sole property. As for the savings, since I had handed them over in cash, I couldn't recover them entirely, due to a lack of concrete proof that Eleanor was managing them on my behalf. I lost 5 years' worth of salary, but I saved my daughter and my honor, and that was the greatest victory. As we walked out of the courthouse, Eleanor, pale with rage over not getting the land, insulted me. Whatever. Consider it a donation. Do you think you're going to do well after abandoning your husband? You'll see how you live your whole life miserably, clinging to that brat. Mark looked at me with hatred. You think you're so smart but don't think you've won. Without me, you're just a divorced woman with baggage. What man is going to look at you? I looked straight into the eyes of the mother and son and smiled proudly. Thanks for your concern. Better worry about your precious mistress and your wonderful son. For me, getting out of that house is a blessing. I hugged my daughter and got into my car. I left behind their faces, disfigured by greed and hatred. The door to hell had closed. A new world was opening up before me. Even if the road ahead was full of thorns, at least I could breathe the air of freedom. 3 months. 90 days. It's not a long time, but for someone who knows how to rise from the abyss, it's enough time to completely change her destiny. The first few days after the divorce were very hard. I rented a small apartment to live with my daughter, taking on the role of both father and mother, along with the financial responsibility. At night, sleeping with my arms around my daughter, I often wet my pillow with tears of sadness over the still open wounds in my heart. Mark's betrayal and Eleanor's cruelty tormented me even in my dreams. But every morning, seeing Lily's innocent smile, I promised myself, "You cannot break down. You cannot let your enemies rejoice in seeing your misfortune. The sweetest revenge isn't insults or fights, but living a life 1,000 times happier and brighter than when you were with them." I threw myself into my work like crazy. With my experience and skills, and no longer tied down by domestic issues, my focus sharpened, and I quickly regained my professional worth. I secured 3 major consecutive contracts for my company. I earned the recognition of my superiors and was promoted to marketing director, doubling my salary. With the money, I started investing in myself. I cut off my long, unkempt hair and swapped it for a chic bob. I threw away the old, baggy clothes Eleanor forced me to wear and replaced them with elegant office suits that highlighted my long, hidden figure. I started practicing yoga, taking care of my skin, and learning to wear light makeup. In the mirror stood a completely different Sophia, young, sophisticated, and full of life. My eyes, once clouded by sadness, now shone with confidence and charisma. Male coworkers and men from partner firms began to look at me with admiration and approach me, but I just smiled. My heart needed a rest. I wanted to pour all my love into my daughter and myself. While my life was shining brighter and brighter, on the other side of the city, the life of Mark and his family began its rapid decline. Through some mutual friends, vague rumors reached me that Mark was in serious trouble. After the divorce, Mark proudly moved Chloe into his house as if they were husband and wife. Eleanor, thrilled, treated her new daughter-in-law, pregnant with the heir, like a queen, but the good times didn't last. Mark invested all his savings and borrowed money from friends to open a high-end restaurant tailored to Chloe's tastes. She envisioned a future where she would sit like the boss lady, lifting barely a finger to count the cash. But Chloe was all facade. She was ignorant and lazy. Instead of managing food quality, she squandered the money on lavish decor and luxury shopping sprees. 2 months after opening, the restaurant was empty. The food was terrible, the staff was unfriendly, and customers stopped coming. The capital ran out, and the interest from the bank and the loan sharks began to crush Mark. To make matters worse, misfortune also struck his main job. Distracted by the restaurant's problems and his mistress's whims, he neglected his responsibilities and made a massive error on an important contract, causing major losses for his firm. He was reprimanded by his superiors, demoted to a lower position, and his salary was slashed in half. Because of money problems, the atmosphere in Eleanor's 4-story brownstone became suffocating. There were no longer laughs about a bright future around the dinner table, only sighs and arguments. Once, I ran into Mark randomly at Whole Foods. He was pushing Chloe's shopping cart. He looked gaunt, with a scruffy beard and worn-out clothes. Chloe, beside him, scowled and constantly scolded him because he couldn't afford the expensive organic artisanal berries she wanted. Seeing me, his ex-wife, in a striking red dress, high heels, carrying a designer bag, and laughing happily with my daughter, Mark was so shocked he dropped the carton of milk he was holding. He stared at me. In his eyes was a mix of surprise, regret, and shame. I walked past him like the wind, without even saying hello. In that moment, I knew I had won. Not because I was richer than him. I had won because I had reclaimed the self-worth I lost when I was with him. But that was only the beginning of his family's collapse. When the money ran out, the love ran out. The mistress Chloe, whom Eleanor treated like a jewel, began to show her true colors as a greedy and shameless gold digger. A new version of the mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law conflict was about to erupt, and it was 100 times more terrible than what I had lived through. While I was enjoying the glorious days of my life, across the city in that 4-story house where I buried my youth, a tragicomedy played out every single day. I didn't go looking for this news. As the saying goes, good news travels fast, but bad news travels faster. Former neighbors who detested Eleanor's arrogance would gossip to me about it. They said that since Chloe moved in, Eleanor had aged 10 years. If she hated me before because my competence and meticulousness made her feel inferior, now she was experiencing firsthand what it meant to invite a tiger into her home. Chloe, 4 months pregnant, entered that house and was treated like royalty. But she took off her mask of a sweet, docile woman right after managing to completely push me out. Chloe was revealed to be a lazy, rude, professional scammer. Every morning she woke up when the sun was already high in the sky, and cleaning the house or cooking was out of the question. She wouldn't even wash the plate she ate from. "Mother-in-law, what's for breakfast today?" "Beef noodle soup." "I don't like it. It's too greasy." "I'm craving Maine lobster tail and truffle mac and cheese." "I know it's expensive, but your grandson needs it. Go to the French market downtown and buy me the best they have." Chloe, lying on the couch while doing her nails, barked orders at Eleanor. The same Eleanor who forced me to wake up at 5 a.m. to make bone broth now had to go out and play servant to fetch gourmet cravings for her new daughter-in-law. In a resentful voice, Eleanor told her, "Even if you're pregnant, you need to move around a bit. If you spend all day lying down, it'll be hard to give birth." Sophia, even right before going into labor, cleaned the house with energy. Hearing my name, Chloe jumped up and glared at her. "Don't compare me to that hillbilly ex of his. I am a valuable woman. I am carrying the precious bloodline of this family. If you like her so much, call her back to serve you. I'm tired and I can't." Eleanor was left speechless. No one had ever talked back to her like that. But thinking of Chloe's bulging belly and the long-awaited baby boy, she swallowed her bitterness and went out to act as her daughter-in-law's maid. Besides being lazy, Chloe was a money-spending machine. While Mark's career was going downhill, the restaurant bleeding cash, and the debts piling up, Chloe spent money like water as if nothing was wrong. Every day, packages arrived with cosmetics and designer bags. Where did the money come from? Chloe relentlessly demanded it from Mark. If he didn't give it to her, she would cry, make a scene, and threaten to get an abortion or say she was getting depressed. Mark, bewitched by Chloe and not wanting to lose face in front of his beautiful wife, went as far as borrowing money from loan sharks to fund Chloe's shopping sprees. The climax of the conflict exploded one night when the loan sharks who had fronted the money for the restaurant knocked on the door to collect the interest. Mark wasn't home, and Eleanor had to go out and humiliate herself, begging them for more time. Returning inside, she found Chloe doing a live stream, showing off hundreds of dollars worth of cosmetics she had just bought. Eleanor couldn't take it anymore. She lunged at her, snatched the phone from her hands, and smashed it against the floor, screaming, "What kind of woman are you? Your husband is drowning in debt. I have to swallow my pride and beg debt collectors. And you dedicate yourself to shopping? Won't you be happy until you ruin this family?" Chloe, seeing her phone shattered, lost her mind. She stood up and shoved Eleanor, who hit her back against the corner of a table. "You crazy old bat! You dare break my phone! The money I spend is given to me by my husband. What does it have to do with you? If this house is ruined, it's because your son is a useless idiot. Not because of me. On top of me doing you the favor of being his woman without even a wedding or proper recognition? Now you come to lecture me?" Eleanor, clutching her aching back, looked in horror at the daughter-in-law she had once praised for being smart and charming. "How dare you hit your mother-in-law? You uneducated brat! I'm going to throw you out of this house." "Throw me out?" Chloe mocked. Her smile twisted into a defiant sneer. "Try it. I'll leave with your grandson. Let's see if your family line goes extinct. And don't forget, that restaurant, even though it's losing money, is legally in my name. If I sell it right now, who do you think will lose out?" At that moment, Mark arrived, reeking of alcohol. Seeing his mother on the floor and his defiant wife, he rushed to separate them. "Stop it! Both of you! Stop! Do you want to kill me?" Mark yelled desperately. Eleanor grabbed her son's legs, crying. "Mark, look how she hits your mother! Did you leave Sophia to bring this thing into our house?" Mark looked back and forth at his mother, at Chloe, and at his home turned into a battlefield. He dropped his arms helplessly. He couldn't scold Chloe because she held his future in her hands, but it hurt to see his mother mistreated. "Chloe, please, stop. My mother is old," Mark said in a low voice. "You shut up, you spineless coward. Your mother hits me, breaks my things, and you take her side?" Fine. Since you've teamed up to torment me, I'm leaving. I don't want this piece of trash house. Chloe stormed up to her room and slammed the door shut. Eleanor collapsed on the floor, wailing loudly, while Mark banged his head against the wall, pulling his hair. The scene must have been so pathetic that just hearing about it made me shudder. Karma had arrived way too fast, striking directly at what Eleanor valued most: her dignity and the hope of continuing her lineage. She had thrown out a kind-hearted daughter-in-law and brought in a tyrant queen who oppressed her. A week after that heated argument, Mark's financial situation completely collapsed. The restaurant had to close, unable to cover expenses. The loan sharks gave him an ultimatum. If he didn't return the $35,000 principal in 3 days, they would come to Eleanor's house and seize their assets. Mark ran around frantically borrowing money from friends and former colleagues, but everyone turned their backs on him. The bad rumors that he had abandoned his wife for a mistress and failed in business had spread, and no one wanted to help him. Cornered, Mark remembered some money he had secretly saved when he lived with me. It was the money he had been skimming from my paycheck without giving it to his mother, about $40,000. He kept it in a personal safe in his bedroom, thinking of using it as an emergency fund or for a promotion. That night, just like the night I was kicked out, it was pouring rain. Mark, tormented by the thought that the next day was the final deadline to pay the debt, came home drunk. He stumbled into the bedroom, ready to take that money to settle the score with the loan sharks and save his mother's house. But when he opened the door, he found a shocking scene. The closet was wide open, and all of Chloe's clothes and luxury bags were gone. And the most terrible part, the small safe in the corner was open and completely empty. Not a single dollar bill was left. Mark, thinking it was a drunken hallucination, rubbed his eyes. He frantically searched the safe, but it was hollow. All the money, his lifeline, had vanished. On the dresser, there was only a hastily written note in red lipstick. Mark, I'm sorry. I can't keep living this life of hardship with you. Consider this money compensation for my youth. Don't look for me. I've moved out of state. Bye. Mark's blood ran cold, draining him of all strength. Chloe had fled. Not only had she abandoned him, but she had taken every last cent, pushing him and his elderly mother into a dead end. You damn bitch! Mark roared like a wounded beast. Without a second thought, he grabbed his motorcycle keys and shot out of the house like an arrow. Mark, where are you going? In this weather? Eleanor yelled upon hearing the noise, but she could only watch as her son's back disappeared behind the curtain of rain. Mark rode like a madman down the empty road, only one thought in his head. I have to find Chloe. I have to get the money back. He figured she had fled to O'Hare Airport or the Greyhound station. The rain lashed his face, the alcohol clouded his mind, and the hatred blinded him. He drove recklessly, running red lights and cursing out loud. As he reached a major intersection, the traffic light turned red, but Mark didn't see it or didn't care. He accelerated to cross the intersection, chasing the ghost of his betrayer. Right at that moment, an 18-wheeler freight truck came barreling down the perpendicular lane. The truck's deafening horn blared, followed by the chilling screech of brakes on the wet asphalt. Boom! A terrible crash that seemed to swallow even the sound of the thunder. Mark's motorcycle was launched dozens of feet, shattering into pieces. Mark's body, like a rag doll, flew through the air before slamming onto the cold asphalt, rolling several times, and coming to a dead stop. Red blood pooled out, mixing with the rain and staining the road. His helmet, split in two, skittered into a corner. The terrified truck driver, pale as a ghost, jumped out of the cab. Bystanders stopped, and a murmur of voices and screams, calling for an ambulance, blended into the chaos. Mark lay there, his eyes wide open, staring at the black sky. Raindrops fell like needles. In the final moments before he lost consciousness, several images flashed through his mind. He saw his ex-wife Me laughing happily with our daughter. He saw his elderly mother crying at the door. And he saw Chloe laughing on top of his pile of money. Everything faded into a muddy darkness and a pain that pierced his very bones. An hour later, at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Eleanor received a call from the Chicago police and collapsed. Crying inconsolably, she caught a cab and rushed to the hospital. But there, facing the doctor, she received an even more terrible piece of news, like a lightning bolt from the sky. That night, Northwestern Memorial Hospital smelled of disinfectant and a faint scent of blood. The ER hallway was lit by cold fluorescent lights, and the clatter of rolling gurneys. Nurses calling out to patients and the sobs of family members created a chaotic symphony on the border between life and death. Eleanor was huddled in a corner of the hallway. She wore tattered pajamas, stained by the rain that hadn't yet dried. She stared blankly at the closed doors of the operating room where her only son was fighting for his life. The red light above the OR door glowed as intensely as the blood that had spread across the road. "Family of patient Mark Miller?" asked a nurse holding some clipboards, her voice urgent. Eleanor stood up unsteadily. Her hands and feet were shaking so badly she almost fell over. I am his mother. How is my son?" "The patient is suffering from massive hemorrhaging and complex traumatic brain injury. We are doing everything we can to stabilize him. But his condition is critical. We need to secure a deposit of $35,000 immediately to arrange an emergency transfer to a specialized neurological trauma center out of network, and to bring in the private neurosurgeon. His insurance lapsed. If this is delayed, we cannot guarantee his life." $35,000. That number again. It was like a 2,000-pound boulder crushing her chest. "Wait a moment, please. I am calling someone who will bring the money," Eleanor begged, crying. "Please hurry. Your son's life hangs by a thread." The nurse turned coldly and walked back in, leaving Eleanor alone in her despair. Eleanor, with trembling hands, pulled her cell phone from her pocket. "She didn't call me directly." At that moment, the first person who came to her mind wasn't her rejected ex-daughter-in-law, but the new daughter-in-law carrying the family's bloodline. Chloe. She dialed her number. It just rang and rang. "Called is unavailable." She called again, 2, 3, 10 times, but only heard the cold voice of the automated operator. She sent a text. But what she saw was a cruel reality. Chloe's account had been deleted, or she had completely blocked her. That damn bitch. Where did you run off to with my son's money? You killed my boy, Chloe! Eleanor screamed desperately, drawing the pitying stares of the people around her. That was when she remembered Mark's words, before he ran out of the house. She ran away. She took off with all the money. Eleanor recalled the last few days. Chloe always said she loved Mark, that she respected her mother-in-law, and promised to give her a son to continue the lineage. It was all a farce. She had planned it all along. She squeezed the money out of him, pushed Mark to borrow from loan sharks, and when Mark had nothing left, she took every last penny from the safe and fled far away. Oh my God. What ingratitude. Son, my son, what a fool you've been, Eleanor lamented, beating her chest. But the tragedy didn't end there. Her phone rang again. This time it was an incoming call, an unknown number. Hello? Eleanor answered with a weak voice. Eleanor, right? Your son Mark sure knows how to hide with all the debts he has. I heard he had an accident and is dying, huh? Said a menacing male voice. It was the loan sharks. Please. Leave us alone. My son is in emergency surgery right now. I don't care if he's in the ER or in hell, the man shouted. The money I lent him is real. If he dies, you'll have to pay it. Just so you know, we're standing outside your house right now. The deed to the house might be mortgaged to the bank, but the furniture isn't. If by tomorrow morning you don't have the $35,000 in principal and interest, I'll send my boys to empty the place, and then we'll pay your son a visit at the hospital. You'll see. Click. Dial tone. Eleanor dropped her hand weakly, and the phone fell to the floor, cracking the screen. It was a dead end. On the verge of losing her house, her son dying and penniless, the golden daughter-in-law had fled, and the debt collectors were laying siege to her. Eleanor looked around, feeling the world crashing down. She searched her contacts, but her relatives didn't answer or made excuses about being busy, afraid she would ask them for money. Her friends, who surrounded her when she was well off, now avoided her like the plague. In the midst of this mind-numbing anguish, a name appeared in her head as a final lifeline. Sophia. Yes, her ex-daughter-in-law, Sophia. The same daughter-in-law she had insulted and thrown out. But she remembered that Sophia was soft-hearted and sentimental, and most importantly, she had heard rumors that she was now a director and made so much money she couldn't even count it. If she is so rich, what is $35,000 to her? After all, Mark is the father of her daughter. She wouldn't just stand by with crossed arms and watch him die. Eleanor calmed herself with that shameless and selfish thought. She picked up the cracked phone and called me. She tried to pressure me into giving her the money, mixing the authoritative tone of her old position as mother-in-law with the desperation of her current situation. And it all ended with my single question. "And who are you?" I rejected her with coldness and firmness. When I hung up, Eleanor sat in the hospital hallway, stunned. Her last hope had vanished. She looked toward the ER doors, and tears rolled down her old, wrinkled face. For the first time in her life, she felt a terrifying loneliness. She realized that she and her son had destroyed, with their own hands, all affection and any possibility of salvation. "Sophia, I was wrong," she murmured. But that belated repentance was only heard by the four walls of the hospital. However, Eleanor didn't expect that on the other end of the line, I, the one who had hung up the phone, wasn't just going to sit back and do nothing. I was sitting in the living room, staring at my phone's black screen. The chamomile tea had gone cold, but my heart was burning. Not out of concern for Mark, but from a mix of complex and indescribable emotions. I told Eleanor I didn't care. I laughed at her audacity. But deep down, I felt curious and a desire to see the finale of the tragic movie they themselves had directed and starred in. I wasn't going to play the role of the savior that Eleanor expected. I wanted to confirm with my own eyes the price the traitors paid. I wanted to see the misery of those who had thrown me out onto the street. And above all, I wanted to clearly show them the position the Sophia of today was in. I got up and went to my walk-in closet. I didn't choose the simple clothes I used to wear. I picked out an elegant, fitted black dress. Over it, I put on a sophisticated cream-colored blazer and paired it with a designer bag and high heels I had gifted myself to celebrate completing a successful project. A light but defined makeup look, with a touch of authoritative red on my lips. In the mirror was a successful, self-confident, and proud woman. She was no longer the disheveled Sophia, who smelled like kitchen grease from a year ago. "Mom, I'm going out to run an errand. Be good at home." I kissed Lily on the forehead and walked out the door. I drove my car into the night. Upon arriving at Northwestern Memorial, I got out. The sound of my heels echoed with authority on the hospital floor, standing out in the noisy and crowded space. The sharp smell of disinfectant made me frown slightly. I remembered the day I gave birth to Lily in a humble suburban hospital, without my husband, and only with my mother's care. That memory made my steps firmer. In the distance, I saw Eleanor. She was huddled in a waiting chair, her head buried between her knees. She looked so small and miserable that if I hadn't looked closely, I would have mistaken her for a homeless person. I stopped in front of her. My shadow cast long, eclipsing the light that illuminated her. Eleanor felt someone standing in front of her and slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were puffy, red, and lost. Seeing an elegant and beautiful woman looking down at her, she was stunned for a few seconds before recognizing me. "Sophia? Is it you, Sophia?" "You came." Eleanor, like a castaway grabbing onto a piece of driftwood, jumped up and tried to grab my hand. "Did you bring the money?" "Thank God. Heaven has helped me." "Quick, the doctor is pressuring us to pay." I took a soft but firm step back, avoiding her touch, as if avoiding something filthy. "Calm down," I said in a cold, emotionless voice. "I didn't come to pay anything." Eleanor stopped her hand in midair. Her twisted smile vanished, and surprise and anger began to surface on her face. "What? What are you saying? If you didn't bring the money, what did you come for? To laugh at me?" "Yes," I replied, looking her straight in the eyes with cruel honesty. "I came to see what karma looks like in person. To see where the mother-in-law who threw her daughter-in-law's clothes onto the street on a rainy night is sitting now, and to see where the husband who beat his wife for a mistress is lying now." "You witch! You demon!" Eleanor screamed, pointing at me. "He is in there dying! How can you say that, you who were his wife?" "Wow," I mocked. "It seems you've forgotten. 3 months ago, you and your people took that title away from me. Now I'm just a stranger, and a stranger has no obligation to save the life of the person who tried to kill her soul." I stepped closer and whispered in her ear so she wouldn't miss a single word. "Eleanor, the $35,000 you need is not a large amount of money for me. I could solve it right now with a signature, but I'm not going to." "Do you know why, Eleanor?" She looked at me, stunned. Fear was beginning to take hold of her. Because with that money, I would rather donate it to an orphanage or save abandoned street dogs than save a traitor like your son. At least those animals, if you feed them, wag their tails. You and your son bite the hand that feeds you. You. Out. Get out of here right now. Eleanor, choking on her rage, collapsed into the chair, clutching her chest and gasping. At that moment, the ER doors swung open, and a doctor, pulling off his surgical mask, walked out with a serious expression. Family of patient Mark Miller? Eleanor no longer seemed to have the strength to stand. I looked at her once and turned to the doctor. That's her. How is he, doctor? The doctor, thinking I was family, shook his head with a look of pity. We managed to stop the bleeding, but the brain damage is so severe that unless a miracle occurs, it is highly likely he will remain in a vegetative state for life. Furthermore, the ICU costs post-operation will be astronomical. We're talking several thousands of dollars a day, so the family must prepare themselves mentally and financially. Vegetative state. Those two words fell like a death sentence. Neither alive nor dead. A body without a soul lying there is a lifelong burden for those left behind. Hearing those words, Eleanor's eyes rolled back and she fainted in the chair. No one caught her. A few nurses rushed over to give her first aid. I observed the chaotic scene. I saw the woman who once barked orders now slumped powerlessly, and the door to the ICU, where Mark would now lie, hooked up to tubes all over his body. I didn't feel as much satisfaction as I thought I would. I just felt an emptiness and a kind of pity. Pity for a life of greed and stupidity. They spent their whole lives fighting to snatch a piece of land from their daughter-in-law, a little bit of money, and in the end, they were left with a bleak future and empty hands. I was about to turn around. My purpose had been fulfilled. I had seen their end. But when I had taken a few steps, a cold, trembling hand suddenly grabbed my ankle tightly. I turned around, surprised. Eleanor had woken up. She wasn't sitting in the chair. She had crawled across the floor to my feet. She wrapped her arms around my legs and lifted her tear-streaked face to look at me. There was no more pride or arrogance. Sophia, I beg you. Please, save my son. She rested her head on the cold tile floor of the hospital. Thud, thud. I was wrong. I am a stupid old woman. I was cruel. I deserve to die. But Mark is still young. Sophia, you who have the means, have mercy and give him the chance to live again as a person. I promise I will pay you back all the money, even if I have to beg or work as a laborer. I will pay my debt by being your slave for life. A woman over 60 years old in the middle of a crowded hospital, kneeling at the feet of a young, elegant woman, banging her head against the floor. Everyone walking by stopped to stare, whisper, and point. Some might think I was an unnatural, heartless daughter. Others seemed to guess the situation. I looked at Eleanor at my feet, the woman who once ordered me to my knees to scrub the floor, who counted every piece of meat I ate. Now she was kneeling at my feet. For a moment, a feeling of human compassion made me waver, but the reasoning of a woman who had suffered too much whispered to me, "Don't believe her." The promises of people like her are only valid when they are cornered. Get up. Stop the theatrics, I said with a voice still cold but slightly softer. You'll pay me back the debt? With what? You are about to lose your house, and your son is in a vegetative state. What are you going to pay with? Eleanor, choking on her sobs, couldn't speak. Prostrate before the tips of my heels, she clasped her hands together and continued begging. Sophia, I know you are angry with me and with Mark. I know I was wrong. But child, they say you shouldn't strike someone who returns repentant. After all, we were a family. We ate at the same table for 5 years. Don't you remember? When you arrived as a newlywed, I took you by the hand to the market. I taught you how to make that beef stew you liked so much. How can you forget all that affection? I stopped and looked at the woman kneeling at my feet. Affection. She was trying to bring up memories that, in her mind, were good. I let out a laugh. My dry laugh echoed in the hospital corridor. Eleanor, what a great memory you have. You remember the stew, but you seem to forget who had to get up at 5 a.m. to boil the meat and wash the vegetables. You remember taking me to the market, but you don't remember screaming at me, calling me a spendthrift because I accidentally bought vegetables that cost $1 more. I crouched down to look her straight in the eyes and raised my voice. That we ate at the same table for 5 years? That's true. For those 5 years, I ate rice bathed in tears. Do you remember that table where when chicken was made, the thighs and wings were all for your son and I got the neck and the bones? You said a daughter-in-law needed to stay thin. Have you forgotten? Eleanor, speechless, lowered her head, avoiding my sharp gaze, but kept pleading. That's because the elders taught us that way. If I was strict with you, it was because I wanted you to grow and run the household well. There was no malice. Mark was wrong to hit you, but he's a man. He has a bad temper. Now he's in there between life and death. Sophia, have mercy. For someone as rich as you, $35,000 isn't a lot of money. If you save him, we can start over. I will accept you again as my daughter-in-law. I will throw out that Chloe and make you the lady of the house. Even in this situation, she was still lost in her delusions of power. Did she actually think being the daughter-in-law of Eleanor's house was still a favor I yearned for? Shut up, I yelled, unable to contain my disgust any longer. Don't speak to me in that tone as if you're doing me a favor. Do you think I need your ruined house full of debts? Do you think I need that vegetative, cheating husband? I took out a tissue, wiped my mouth after shouting, and continued with the coldest voice I could muster. That you were strict to make me grow? No, Eleanor, you weren't strict. You were cruel. You exploited my labor, took my salary, looked down on my parents, and the cherry on top. That rainy night, you and your son threw me out into the street like a dog with my daughter, just because I wouldn't sell my parents' land to support his mistress. That cruelty isn't a lesson. It's the vile nature that you and your son carry to your very bones. Eleanor trembled from head to toe. Every one of my words was like a knife tearing at her thick skin. That I should save that man? I pointed toward the ICU. Why should I save the man who pushed me to the brink of death when you threw me out without a cent, without a home, on a rainy night with my child? Did you feel pity for me? When your son hit my head until I bled, did you stop him? No. You insulted me from the sidelines and cheered him on. Eleanor, sobbing, couldn't continue. No one can escape karma, Eleanor. The suffering your son is experiencing now, the reality you are living, is the price of your bad actions. Don't blame heaven or others. Blame yourself. I stood up straight and fixed my clothes. This conversation had exhausted me, but at the same time, it had allowed me to vent years of repressed anger. I had said everything I needed to say, but Eleanor, desperate, still clung to the last lifeline. Even though I had already punctured it, she covered her ears and refused to listen. All right, I was wrong. And Mark was wrong too. But child, the baby that Chloe is carrying in her womb. At the end of the day, it's the blood of this family. How can you watch as his father dies and he becomes a fatherless child from the womb? You are a mother too. Have pity on the innocent child. She brought up the child again. She thought that if she appealed to my maternal instinct and my kindness, I would soften. But she didn't know that the truth about that child would be the final, fatal blow, the one that would end all her hopes. I looked at Eleanor. My gaze went from anger to pity, a profound pity for someone who remained a fool to the bitter end. You really want to know the truth about that baby boy? Very well, I'll show you so you can finally wake up. So you know exactly why your son risked his life. I opened my purse, took out my phone, and opened the file a private investigator had sent me 2 days earlier. I brought the illuminated phone screen close to Eleanor's stunned face. On the screen were several clear photos and text message conversations. Look closely. This woman is your precious daughter-in-law, Chloe. And this man is a real estate mogul from Miami, who has a wife. The first photo showed Chloe and an overweight man hugging affectionately at a resort. The date of the photo was clear. 6 months ago. Do you know how to count? 6 months ago, she was with this man. At that time, your son Mark was at home with me, playing the role of the exemplary husband. I swiped to the next photo. It was an ultrasound of Chloe's fetus taken at a private clinic. Look at the estimated due date, Eleanor. This fetus is now over 22 weeks along. That means over 5 months. But your son has only been with her for 3 months. Do you understand what that means? Eleanor, her eyes glued to the screen, trembled and babbled. No, it can't be. She told me she was 3 months along. Her belly was small. She fooled you. I mocked. That woman is a professional. She knows how to dress, how to hide her belly. And here, this text message is the most interesting part. I opened the conversation between Chloe and a close friend. The black and white letters appeared as the most shameless confession. I'm pregnant by that fat guy. The dude is scared of his wife and won't claim it. He gave me $3,000 to get an abortion, but I feel bad. The doctor says if I abort this time, I might end up sterile. So what are you going to do? Keep it. I'm hooking up with this good catch right now. His name is Mark. He's an only child, has a nice townhouse in Chicago, and his mom is crazy for a baby boy. This guy is a spineless coward, easy to fool. A couple of sweet words and he'll believe anything. I'm going to make him believe he's the father. I'll have a place to live, cash, and his mom, since she's old, will go crazy with joy. Maybe she'll even kick out the ex-wife and move me in. Finishing reading the message, Eleanor looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She collapsed onto the floor, grabbed her head with both hands, and opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her whole world, her pride, the hope of continuing the lineage, everything she had used to justify her cruelty, had now shattered like a soap bubble. The old saying about raising other people's children couldn't be truer. Her son Mark had been the victim of the most painful scam of his life. He betrayed his wife, abandoned his family and his dignity to follow a depraved woman, and in the end, it turned out he was going to raise another man's child. He spent the money earned by his wife's sweat, even stolen money, to support a woman carrying another man's blood in her womb. And the bitterest part was that he had the accident trying to chase down that scammer to get the money back. He lay there waiting for death with his body destroyed. All for a lie. A stupid and vain death. Oh my God, son, why were you such a fool? I ruined you! Eleanor screamed with a heart-wrenching wail, banging her head against the floor. Her crying was no longer fake. It was the extreme pain of a mother realizing she had pushed her own son to his death. She helped a snake destroy her son's home, kicked out a good daughter-in-law, and attracted calamity and ruin. Do you understand now? I put my phone away and looked at her with pity. This is the truth you have to face. There is no baby boy. There is no kind-hearted daughter-in-law. Only the stupidity and greed of you and your son, Sophia. Save him. Even if he was a fool, he is my son. Eleanor crawled to my feet again, but with no strength left. Her voice was barely a whisper. I looked one last time at the ICU. Mark deserved to be punished, but seeing him die, deceived, made me feel, on one hand, pity for his life. However, pity wouldn't make me carry the weight of that life again. Eleanor, I cannot pay the $35,000. That money is my daughter's future. The future of the same granddaughter you once mistreated. But out of a minimum of humanity, I won't let you starve to death here. I took a business card from my wallet and placed it in Eleanor's hand. This is the contact for a charitable organization that helps patients of severe accidents. My company sponsors them often. I will call to ask them to review Mark's case. With luck, they might cover part of the hospital expenses. The rest you'll have to figure out yourself. Sell the house, sell a piece of land, take out a loan. That's your business. This is as far as I can help. With that said, I turned around decisively and walked away. Behind me, I heard Eleanor's voice calling me. Sophia! I'm sorry. I truly regret it. But I didn't stop. Walking out the hospital doors, a cold night wind blew. But strangely, I felt warm in my heart. I had done the right thing according to my conscience. I didn't take revenge by letting them die, but I also wasn't stupid enough to let them use me again. I showed them the truth, and the truth was the cruelest judgment. Life is fair. Mark, from that day on, would face eternal darkness or live with a lifelong disability. That was the price of betrayal. Chloe fled with the money, but she would never live in peace with scammed cash. And Eleanor, the rest of her life would be a hell of regret and loneliness. And me? I looked up at the night sky full of stars. Tomorrow, I would take my daughter to school again and go to work with a burning passion. I would live a brilliant, independent, and happy life. because I deserved it. As I walked out the doors of Northwestern Memorial, the darkness of the night seemed to intensify behind my back. The ambulance sirens continued to wail mournfully, but my heart was strangely calm. I left Eleanor behind with the cruel truth and extreme pain. However, my steps suddenly slowed, not out of regret, nor with the intention of going back to pay the $35,000 and save that traitor. That money was my blood and sweat. My daughter Lily's future. Not even in my wildest dreams would I think of spending it on the life of the man who tried to push my daughter and me to our deaths. But deep down in my heart, the conscience of a human being remained. I was different from them. Even if they were my enemies, my pride didn't allow me to be so cruel as to ignore a life fading away due to a lack of money. I stopped next to my car and took out my phone. I didn't call Eleanor. I called a longtime partner of my firm, Mr. Jenkins, the director of the Bridge of Love Charity Foundation. Mr. Jenkins, it's Sophia. I apologize for calling at this hour. Yes, it's just that there's an urgent patient at Northwestern Memorial. A young man, very serious from a traffic accident, and from a humble family. Yes, his mother is elderly and frail, and they've been scammed and lost all their money. They can't pay for the surgery deposit. I took a deep breath and spoke calmly. I would appreciate it if you could review his application for urgent assistance. I vouch for him. Yes, only whatever the foundation's bylaws allow. No, please don't say I asked you to. Just say you found out through the hospital network. Hanging up, I let out a sigh of relief. It was the last and most dignified thing I could do for Mark. I didn't take the money out of my own pocket, but with my credibility, I opened a path to salvation for him. I did it not because there was any lingering romantic affection, but because I wanted to accumulate good karma for my daughter. I wanted to be able to proudly say in the future that I lived doing the right thing as a human being, with nothing to be ashamed of. I looked off into the distance, toward the hospital lobby. Eleanor was still sitting there, clutching the card I had left her, looking desolate and shrunken, like a dry leaf facing a storm. She would never receive the $35,000 from me. She would have to carry the weight of his life on her own. She would have to sell the 4-story townhouse that was her pride and joy to pay the debts and her son's medical bills. That was the price she had to pay. I opened the car door and got behind the wheel. The soft scent of perfume inside enveloped me, erasing the disgusting smell of disinfectant. My face in the rearview mirror looked a little tired, but my gaze shone with resolve. "Goodbye, past," I whispered. I started the engine, and the car glided smoothly down the empty road. I thought of Lily, who would be sleeping peacefully at home. Tomorrow morning, when she woke up, I would tell her a different bedtime story, a story about a mommy who fought an evil dragon to protect the happy castle of mother and daughter. I would teach my daughter that kindness is valuable, but it must be offered to the right people. I would teach her not to let anyone trample on her worth, and to always have an escape route, financial independence. Because when the storm comes, the most solid support is your own 2 legs, and the money you have earned yourself. That night I slept deeply, without dreams. The 5-year nightmare and the echo of the midnight call were completely over. With a civilized and firm cut, I had severed the disgusting thread of destiny, but life continued. Time, like sand slipping through fingers, brought unexpected changes, and karma, the fairest judge, handed down its final sentence for all of us, in a way no one could avoid. 2 years later, on a cold New Year's Eve in Chicago, the entire city was busy preparing for the holiday. I was standing in my 20th floor office, looking out at the city full of twinkling lights. On my desk, a shiny plaque read, "Sophia Martin, Vice President." In the last 2 years, I hadn't stopped pushing myself. From being a woman abandoned by her husband and thrown out by her mother-in-law, I became one of the key executives in the corporate group. I bought a luxury penthouse with views of the Chicago skyline, and brought my parents to live with me. Lily, now in 1st grade, went to an international prep school, and was growing up smart and beautiful like her mother. My life was now filled with laughter and peace. I enjoyed trips abroad with my valuable friends and, above all, absolute freedom. Sometimes successful men approached me, but I was in no rush. I fully enjoyed the happiness of being a single, proud woman. On New Year's Eve afternoon, I drove out to buy decorations for my new house. While waiting at a stoplight at a busy intersection on the Magnificent Mile, a scene on the sidewalk froze me. On the cold pavement of the bustling commercial street, an old woman with completely white hair, dressed in old, ragged clothes, was sitting on the ground. She was trying to feed, spoonful by spoonful, some mush to a man sitting in an old wheelchair beside her. The man was skin and bones, his hands and feet twisted, and his mouth drooping. His empty eyes stared off into infinity, and drool ran down his chin, soaking the dirty bib on his chest. Although the dust of time and hardship had left them in a miserable state, I instantly recognized them as Eleanor and Mark. Mark hadn't died. The surgery saved his life, but the severe consequences of the brain damage left him hemiplegic, having lost his speech and cognitive abilities, living like a vegetable. He became a child in a giant's body, feeling nothing. He depended entirely on others for all his daily needs, like eating and cleaning himself. And Eleanor, after selling the townhouse in Lincoln Park at a loss to pay off the debts and hospital bills, was left with nothing. With the leftover money, she could barely afford to rent a moldy room in a rundown neighborhood. The mother-in-law, who was once arrogant and authoritarian, had now become the lifelong servant of her disabled son. The light would take 30 seconds to change. I rolled down my car window a bit to get a better look. Eat, honey. One more spoonful. Mom is begging you, Eleanor pleaded with a hoarse, tearful voice. With trembling hands, she brought the mush to Mark's mouth, but he had a slight convulsion and knocked the bowl away. The hot mush splattered on both of their clothes. Eleanor broke down crying. As she wiped the mush off her son's clothes with her bare hands, she beat her chest. My God, why is my life so hard? I wish you had died back then. It would have been a relief. Chloe, damn you, you ruined us. Mark, sitting there, made meaningless noises and cried with his soulless eyes, perhaps deep in his shattered subconscious. He still felt pain and regret, but he couldn't speak or move to atone for his sins. He was trapped in the prison of his own body, forced to watch how his elderly mother suffered every day because of him. That was a punishment more terrible than death. Seeing the scene, I no longer felt hatred in my heart, only a sadness for the fleeting nature of life. I had heard the rumor that Chloe, the cherished future daughter-in-law, after fleeing with the money, was found out by her lover, the Miami mogul, who took all the money from her. Now she lived miserably, hiding somewhere near the border. Truly, everyone reaps what they sow. They once tried to take everything from me and corner me, but in the end, their own greed and malice plunged them into an abyss from which they could not escape. Eleanor lifted her head, and her gaze landed on my luxury car. She probably didn't see me through the tinted windows, but she saw the wealth she so desired and once possessed. In her eyes, there was envy, regret, and despair. Not in her wildest dreams would she imagine that the person sitting in the car was the same daughter-in-law she had thrown out for being useless. The light turned green. I rolled up the window and stepped on the gas. The car glided forward, leaving behind the image of that miserable pair amidst the bustling crowd. I didn't stop to give them money, nor did I get out of the car to humiliate them again. My silence and my departure were the clearest answer. We now belonged to different worlds. I drove home. There, my parents and my daughter were waiting for me for our New Year's Eve dinner. Arriving at the door, Lily ran out and hugged me. Mommy, you're here! Grandpa and Grandma were waiting for you for the soup. I hugged my daughter, smelled the scent of her hair, and felt the warmth of family spreading through my body. I'm here, my love. Seeing the holiday table filled with laughter, my healthy parents, and my good daughter, I smiled with satisfaction. This was true happiness. A happiness built not on calculations and deceit, but on true love, hard work, and kindness. Final message from the final chapter of the tumultuous story of Sophia, Mark, and Eleanor together. The squeak of a wheelchair on the street, the wail of an elderly mother full of belated regret, and the image of a luxury car disappearing into the New Year's Eve night. All these scenes dance before our eyes, leaving a profound resonance and emotions that words cannot fully express. A story has ended, but in the heart of each of us bloom thousands of thoughts about the various facets of life, human duty, and the journey to find true happiness in this turbulent world. How about today? While we share a hot cup of tea, we reflect on the deep meaning of this story so we can extract painful but applicable lessons for our own lives and live in a more serene, dignified, and brilliant way. The first and most powerful lesson this story gives us is how fairly and sometimes cruelly the law of cause and effect works. We often hear the saying, "You reap what you sow," but only after witnessing the end of Eleanor's family do we feel a true respect for this immutable law of the universe. Karma is not a divine judgment, but the inevitable result of the actions, words, and thoughts we sow in the world. Eleanor and Mark sowed the seeds of greed, selfishness, betrayal, and cruelty, and in the end, they had to swallow that poisonous fruit themselves. The image of Mark in a wheelchair, unable to speak or move, crying with soulless eyes, is a punishment more terrible than death. He is trapped in the prison of his own body, forced to watch powerlessly as his elderly mother suffers and his family is ruined. It is the price of betrayal and weakness. Eleanor, too, her former authority vanished, must spend the rest of her life in regret and loneliness, sitting on the street feeding her son. The lesson this gives us is clear. You cannot build your own happiness on the suffering of others. What is obtained by vile means ultimately fades like smoke. Live with kindness. Maintain a pure heart. That is the strongest shield that will protect us from all the storms of life. But the brightest part of this story is Sophia's dazzling resurgence. She symbolizes the strength, dignity, independence, and deep compassion of the modern woman. She lifted herself up from the depths of pain, dried her tears, and rewrote her life. The lesson Sophia gives to all women is to be independent and self-sufficient. Don't leave your life and your happiness in the hands of others. When we are financially independent, we have a voice, we are respected, and we have the right to choose. Turn pain into strength, and the world's contempt into an engine to fly higher. The attitude Sophia showed in the hospital teaches us about the limits of self-respect and dignified forgiveness. She didn't sacrifice her future to save her enemy, but she fulfilled her minimum duty as a human being. It wasn't revenge, but a way to save her own soul. Letting go of hatred isn't forgetting the past, but accepting it and moving forward. Life is short and unpredictable. Instead of wasting time on regrets or hatred for the past, we should take care of the present. Love yourselves more, take care of your health, acquire knowledge, and spend time with the people who really matter. No matter what difficult situation you find yourself in, if you never give up and constantly strive according to your conscience, at the end of the dark tunnel, a radiant morning like a rainbow will always wait for you, just like Sophia, who used tragedy as a springboard to soar higher. If this story has resonated deeply in your hearts and you have found a valuable lesson in it, we ask you to help spread these human values. A like from you is a great encouragement, and sharing it can be a gift of light for someone who I will return with another moving life story. Your company is the greatest driving force for us to continue sharing love and hope. Thank you for listening. May peace always be in your hearts, warmth in your chests,